Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Pallabha Girivanadhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Gauranidai, 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 Jaya Gauranidai. Jaya Kishore, Kishore, Jaya Kishore, 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 Jaya Kishore, Kishore. Sundar Radha Shama Sundara Re. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jaya Krishna Balaram. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privajakachaja Stotra Satasvi Sriman His Divine Grace Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki ISKCON Founder Acharya BBT Founder Acharya His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privajakachaja Stotra Satasvi Sriman His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pamanityananda Shadvaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki Shri Vrindavan Dhama ki Shri Navadvip Maya Purdam ki Shri Gangamai Jamunamai ki Shrimati Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki Antra Srimad Bhagavatam ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to you, Shri Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shanavadi Paschachidesita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 16th chapter, the 6th verse. And the title of the chapter is King Chichiketu Meets the Lord. But we're not going to get there yet. Yata vashtuni panyani emadini tatastatak paryantanti nireshveham jivo yonishu kartushu yata vastuni panyani hemadini tatastatak paryatani nareshvebham jivo jonishu kartrishu yata vastuni panyani hemadini tatastata paryatani nareshvaivam jivo jonishu kartrishu. Vaishnavas? Yata vashtuni panyani hemadini tatastata Paryatani Nareshevam Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu Tatavashtuni Panyani Hemadini Tatastata Parchatanti Nareshveham Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu Tatavashtuni Panyani Tatani Tatastata Vitavashtuni Kanani Emadini Kartashu Yata, just as Vastuni commodities Panyani, meant for trading, Hema Adini, such as gold, Tatak, from here to there, Paryatani, move about, Nareshu, among men, Evam, in this way, Jiva, the living entity, Jonishu, in different species of life, Kartrishu, in different material fathers. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of its fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. Purport. It has already been explained that Chitraketu's son was his enemy in a past life and had now appeared as his son just to give him more severe pain. Indeed, the untimely death of the son caused severe lamentation for the father. One may put forward the argument, if the king's son was his enemy, how could the king have so much affection for him? In answer, the example is given that when someone's wealth falls into the hands of his enemy, the money becomes the enemy's friend. Then the enemy can use it for his own purposes. Indeed, he can even use it to harm its previous owner. Therefore, the money belongs neither to one party nor to the other. The money is always money, but in different situations it can be used as an enemy or as a friend. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, it is not by any father or mother that the living entity is given his birth. The living entity is a completely separate identity from the so-called father and mother. By the law of nature, the living entity is forced to enter the semen of a father and be injected into the womb of the mother. He is not in control of selecting what kind of father he will accept. Prakriti kriyamanani, the laws of nature, force him to go to different fathers and mothers, just like a consumer commodity that is purchased and sold. Therefore, the so-called relationship of father and son is an arrangement of Prakriti or nature. It has no meaning, and therefore it is called illusion. The same living entity sometimes takes shelter of an animal father and mother, and sometimes a human father and mother. Sometimes he accepts a father and mother among the birds, and sometimes he accepts a demigod father and mother. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Brahmanda Brahmitikon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Harassed life after life by the laws of nature, the living entity wanders throughout the entire universe in different planets and different species of life. Somehow or other, if he is fortunate enough, he comes in touch with a devotee who reforms his entire life. Then the living entity goes back home, back to Godhead. And therefore it is said, Janame Janame Sabe Pita Mata Pai, Krishna Guru Nahi Mile, Bhaja Hari Ai. In the transmigration of the soul through different bodies, everyone in every form of life, be it human, animal, tree, or demigod, gets a father and mother. That is not very difficult, or this is not very difficult. The difficulty is to obtain a bona fide spiritual master and Krishna. Therefore, the duty of a human being is to capture the opportunity to come in touch with Krishna's representative, the bona fide spiritual master. Under the guidance of the spiritual master, the spiritual father, one can return home, back to Godhead. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharani. Whoops. Nirvari Paschachade Satarane. Mukam Karati Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yatkripa Tamaham Bande Shri Guru Dinatanam Bhagavanam Shri Chaitanya. So, meditating a little bit on this section of the Bhagavatam and the messages herein, and thinking how, after talking yesterday about evaluation and preaching application and all this stuff, and then you think about, you go to a funeral, right, and there's a person lamenting over the death of a child, and you come in and you say, you're not that body, and that wasn't really your child anyway. And you think that really that's quite heavy, that level of being able to transmit knowledge so strong. This section of the Bhagavatam, very strong. And one has to appreciate the power, the potency of Angira and Narada in their ability to understand the qualification of Chitraketu and give him the medicine in the dose that he could handle. Because if you give that medicine to some other body, it might kill them. But because they were expert physicians and they could understand the capacity of Chitraketu, they could give him this very, very strong medicine. And rather than die from it, he was immediately cured. It took him a very short period of time before he was able to completely digest that medication, absorb it, and reap the benefit of it. So this is one reason why Srila Prabhupada speaks at the end of the purport about how important it is to have a bona fide spiritual master. Parents, they come, whether you want them or not. You get whoever you get, and sometimes you get bird parents, and sometimes you get dog parents, and sometimes you get great parents. But whatever parents you get, you don't have any choice of those. But you have a choice, or you have a duty, an obligation to accept and surrender to a bona fide spiritual master. And when we surrender to the spiritual master, then his information goes in and does its work. When Arjuna surrendered to Krishna, and he said, now I'm confused about duty, please instruct me, I'm a soul surrendered unto you. At that point, Krishna could give him the sauce, and he did. He said, you're a fool, you're acting like a fool, how has this impotency come upon you? So because Arjuna was receptive, Krishna was able to tell it like it is. And we see that, I know because I talked to many present spiritual masters, that when a disciple is not really surrendered, or the spiritual master perceives that the disciple is partially surrendered, maybe not 100% surrendered, then the instruction is also tapered to the absolute truth is always there, but not in such full dose. If you want a full dose, you got to be fully surrendered, and you got to be willing to receive it, because the spiritual master, he adjusts the level of the amongst my God brothers and sisters. There used to be a understanding that if Srila Prabhupada, if only yells at the most surrendered devotees. So it's a good sign if Prabhupada yells at you. I remember sitting in a class with Shruti Kirti Prabhu and Hari Sari. And for several days, they were talking about Prabhupada Leela. And then the last day, they had a competition who got yelled at the most by Srila Prabhupada. And Hari Sari won with one particular incident where he was serving. I don't know how many of you have been to Vrindavan and have seen Prabhupada's house. So generally, when we go to Prabhupada's house, we go in the downstairs and we see Prabhupada's bed there and the place where Prabhupada sat. And we see that place as Prabhupada's living quarters. But actually, Prabhupada slept upstairs. And most of the time, not all. When he was ill, he was downstairs. But there's an upstairs room, and the women chant up there in the morning, but it's a very small room. And Prabhupada used to sleep up there. So now there's a bathroom in there, but there didn't used to be a bathroom in there. And so what happened was Hari Sari went out to get something, and he locked Srila Prabhupada in the room. You know how they have these sliding doors in India where you can't, once you slide the slide, you can't open it from the inside anymore. It's just a sliding thing. So he just, force of habit, you walk in and out of a million rooms, and you get used to just sliding the bar when you walk out of the room. So Hari Sari walked out of the room and went to do something, and he slid the bar. So then Prabhupada had to go to the bathroom. He couldn't get out of the room. And so he was banging on the door, and no one heard. Then he went to the window, and he screamed downstairs in the courtyard, and he caught the ear of one devotee. And then one devotee went to Hari Sari and said, "You're in trouble. Prabhupada's calling you." And so Hari Sari Prabhu went up there and opened the door. But he said the way Prabhupada chastised him was he didn't talk. He didn't say anything to him. And he just left the room and went downstairs. And for the whole afternoon, he didn't say one word to him. So that was enough for Hari Sari. That was like the supreme chastisement. I had a different chastisement. It was more vocal. I was in Dallas, and I was serving the deities there and running an ashram for young women. And when I was asked to be the head pujari for Radha Kalachandji. So, when you take over a service and you're not so familiar with it, you kind of clean everything and kind of get an idea of where everything is. So you go through everything and you try to figure out where things are. And in the course of doing that, I found this box. And in the box, there were some conch shell eyes, rather big conch shell eyes. Because I don't know how many of you have seen Kalachandji, but Kalachandji has a very big face. Actually, the history of Kalachandji is that he was found in a museum by my god sister, Kaushalya. And Prabhupada, actually, I wrote Prabhupada from Toronto, and I asked him if we could get deities. And he said that he had already instructed Kaushalya and one other devotee, Srimati, to go to Jaipur and get 3 sets of deities, one for Toronto, one for Detroit, and one for Dallas. And so I had history with these deities, even before they came to America. And it's a long story, which I won't say necessarily now. But I was looking and I found these eyes. So Prabhupada was there. He was in Dallas, and he used to stay in the sanctuary, which is in another building over on the other side. And so I asked the devotees, what are these eyes for? And they said, well, originally Srila Prabhupada had said that he wanted Kalachandji to have conch shell eyes, but we didn't like the way they looked, so we didn't put them on. And for me, that was like a disconnect. I couldn't understand that. When Prabhupada said you should have these eyes, and you didn't like them, so you didn't put them on. That doesn't make sense. So what they had done is, they had painted Kalachandji, and that was a whole scene too, because then when Kalachandji was supposed to be installed, he wasn't dry, and Prabhupada said, I'm leaving, and then they put heaters all over the room to dry the deities overnight, and then they were installed. And that had happened a year before. So anyway, I in my zealousness as a young new devotee, fairly new devotee, I decided, well, if Prabhupada said to put them on, we should put them on, right? So I went up to Prabhupada's room. I walked across the hallway and outside and upstairs, and I walked into Prabhupada's room. There were a bunch of devotees in there. And I sat down, and Prabhupada said, greeted me and then asked me what I wanted. And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, I just wanted to say that I was cleaning the Pujari room and I found these eyes, and I heard that you wanted them to be on Kalachandji, and I want you to know that if you still want them on Kalachandji, I'll put them on. And Prabhupada said, Kalachandji's eyes are fine, just the way they are. But somehow I thought that maybe he didn't understand me, or he didn't realize that it was okay. So I repeated it again. I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, I just want you to know that if it's your desire to have the eyes on Kalachandji, then we'll put them on. And Prabhupada repeated, Kalachandji's eyes are fine, just the way they are. But one more time, I thought, well, it doesn't make sense. Prabhupada said he wanted them, they're not on. He must be just doing that just to be nice. And so maybe if I say it again, he'll tell me what he really wants. So then I said it again. So anyway, I just want to make it clear. And he cut me off mid-sentence. And he said, I'm Prabhupada, and I'm telling you what I want. Kalachandji's eyes are fine, just the way they are. Because I kept saying, I heard Prabhupada wanted, and he said, I'm Prabhupada, I'm telling you what I want. So sometimes the spiritual master has to do some open heart surgery. And in this particular case, it was much, even at that time, it was pretty open heart surgery. Now it's funny and everybody laughs. And I've told that story to literally an audience of thousands of people, and everybody laughed. But I didn't laugh at the time. And when it was over, one of the devotees in the room said, it sounded like you wanted Prabhupada to yell at you. But I really didn't think that way at the time. And I'm sure that when Chitraketu was lamenting over his son's passing away in a very untimely manner, he was a very young boy, a couple of days old, he wasn't thinking that he wanted to get yelled at by Chitraketu. He wasn't thinking, oh, spiritual master, come and give me the sauce so that I can get out of this illusion, But nevertheless, in Angira and Narada's infinite mercy and the mercy of this jiva, they chose to give him the sauce. They chose to knock the illusion out of him. And they did. They succeeded in knocking the illusion out of him. And then Angira even said, I could have just told you this at the very beginning, but you wouldn't have been able to hear me. Now that you've gone through this cathartic experience, now you can hear. So now I can give it to you. And we see that with Srila Prabhupada, it was like that too. At the beginning, he was very, very gentle, very, very kind. And he was always very kind, but overtly kind, materialistically appeared very kind. He was, feeding us and cleaning up and waiting online to wash his dishes, to go to the bathroom. He was cleaning up after us. He was very unassuming in his position. And he didn't give us any rules until a little bit later on. And he was sensitive to the fact that when we were ready, he would take us to the next step, and he would constantly take us to the next step. And to those people who were involved in management or he gave responsibility to, sometimes he was pretty heavy, and he would give them the sauce because they had to train others. Just like you say with Jud Bharat. Jud Bharat, when he became Jud Bharat, he chose not to speak to anybody. He chose not to give anybody any advice about anything, not to worry about offenses to him or anything. He just blocked out the whole scene, and he just went through his life like a dull madman. Even people were trying to kill him, but he didn't do anything about it. He chose not to preach to them or not to try to convince them not to kill him. But when he met Rahugana, it was different. Because Rahugana was a king, and he had an obligation to take care of his people and to be a good ruler and to lead them properly. And he wasn't doing his job. He wasn't doing it properly because he was an illusion. And so Jud Bharat considered this is an important person. First of all, he has some qualification. He's in a very important position because we understand that the king is in a position because Krishna put them there. I'll tell you afterwards one example of how deep that realization is. But anyway, Jad Bharat, he perceived this is a king. He has some qualification. He didn't get to the king place without any qualification, but he's misusing his position, and he's mistreating people, and he's not going to be able to do his job properly because his real job is to make sure that these people make spiritual advancement. How's that going to happen if he's in the material consciousness? And so he chose to break his silence, specifically to give Rahugana good instruction. And because Rahugana was in a big position, even the simplest level of instruction coming from what Rahugana was thinking was just a simple Sudra guy, big muscular carrying palanquin person, he was offended. He even threatened Jad Bharat, I'll take my sword. You think you're a wise guy? I'll cut your head off. I'll teach you. But Jad Bharat didn't care. He was totally nonplussed by it, and he kept pushing through the illusion. And as soon as Rahugana showed some sign, I'm willing to hear, then he got 2 chapters of the Bhagavatam. So he saw an opening. He saw a person who he might be able to give some knowledge to. It was important that he learn it, and then he broke his silence. And as soon as there was receptivity, then it came double barrel, the information that he needed. So we can take a lesson from that, because if we're ready to hear, then the spiritual master will train us properly. And if we're not ready to hear, then we'll get drops. We'll get drops. And of course, the spiritual master will train us, but it will be a gradual process. We have to decide how fast we want to go, how much surrender we can put into the mix, because the bona fide spiritual master will ascertain our readiness before administering the medication. If someone goes to the hospital to get treated for a disease, if their overall health is weak, they may not be able to do the necessary operation or give the necessary medicine. They may have to build up the health first, the overall health, because you can't take it. You can't take the medicine, and you can't take the trip. And so therefore, you have to go through some, eating a regular diet and drinking proper water and whatever, maybe taking some little bit of medication before you're strong enough to handle the full dose. So it really requires that both the recipient and the teacher are ready and able to come together to bear the full fruit of the message. So here we have an example of that happening. Now, in our lives, we have multiple spiritual masters. And we have, of course, Srila Prabhupada as our spiritual master, and we also have life as a spiritual master. And so if we take the slow road, or the no road, and we don't surrender to a spiritual master, really surrender, not just like, I promise I'll chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regular principles, Haribol. But we really surrender to a spiritual master, then we get particular prescription for our spiritual advancement. But if we don't, then the doctor becomes Prakriti. The doctor becomes the material energy. And the material energy prescribes things for us. And so we go through life, and life teaches us lessons. So again and again, we get beat up, and we get humbled, and we get pounded, and we get, hopefully, realizations about the nature of the material world. And when we come to the realization that the material world is a place of misery where repeated birth and death take place, then we're ready to hear spiritual life. If you put fire on a piece of wood that's wet, then the fire doesn't take up. The wood has to become ready to burn. And so the ability to give Krishna to somebody comes when that person is ready to receive, and the spiritual master has to be able to understand. And we have two situations like that in here, because we're picking up this part of the Bhagavatam from a conversation that is taking place from someone else who's about to die. And so Parikshit is about to die, and he's being told by somebody, by Sukadeva Goswami, that he's very receptive also, because something's happening to him also that's accelerating his ability to hear. And Sukadeva is very enlivened by it. He's very enlivened by the opportunity to help him with this journey. And so if you look here in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we're approximately a little teeny bit more than 1/3 through Parikshit's 7 days. So he has about 3.5 days left before he leaves. And so it's becoming more and more critical, and he's becoming more and more enthusiastic, more and more receptive. He has to get the essence of the human form of life, because he's out. He's gone. And so he's approaching a sadhu. He's very receptive, and he's getting the full information. And then within that information, we have this information and so much other information that comes that helps him make spiritual advancement. I said I would refer to something. I'm just going to give you the reference because I don't have it here. But there's a letter that Prabhupada wrote to the President of India in 1956. And maybe Ramapad Maharaj shared it with you, because I share it with the GBC. But in 1956, Prabhupada wrote a letter to the President of India. And he began that letter by saying, "You're just like the king. And because you're the king, I know that you've been put in this place by God. You have a special qualification. I don't know what it is, but you have a special qualification because you have this position. And because you have this position given to you by God, I am obligated as a citizen to go to you with a humble request and expect that you'll hear that request, and according to your wisdom which you receive, because God is working with you, you'll receive good wisdom and you'll act appropriately according to my hearing my request and responding to my request." And then Prabhupada proceeded to tell him repeatedly, he says it 4 or 5 times in the letter, that he's positive that he has a system for taking every man and every woman in the world back to Godhead in this lifetime. He says it several times. He says, "I am as sure as a person who has just eaten a big feast is sure after they eat the feast that they are satisfied. That's how sure I am that I have the system. I know how to help every man and every woman in the world go back to Godhead in this lifetime." He said, "I know that I am going to go back to Godhead in this lifetime." And he kept saying it over and over. And then at the end, so he sent this man some copy of Back to Godhead, and he signed his letter. He said, "So I'm waiting for you to hear my request for assistance so that together we can help to save every man and woman in the world and help them go back to Godhead. And until that time, I'm crying alone in the wilderness." That's how he signed the letter. Satsvarup Maharaj quotes that ending in one, I think he even names a chapter, "Crying Alone in the Wilderness." That's what it came from. It came from that letter. And it's 1956, and it's a very, very amazing letter to read how Prabhupada knew what to do. He knew that he had the Sambandha, he had the Prayojana, and he had to convince us to take the Abhideya, had to take the system. That was his challenge. His challenge wasn't what we should do. His challenge was how to get us ready to take the medicine. Because he had the medicine, and he had it. So because he was so potent and so strong, he could give us the medicine over time, and hopefully we'll keep taking the medicine until the cure is there and we go back to Godhead. But the formula's there and the medicine's there. We just have to take it. So looking at the potency of Angira and Narada, how able they were to administer the medicine, to see the qualification of the the patient. We have just before that, right? Queen Kritaduti was looking at the baby, and she was also saying to the baby, please come back, come back, come back, please, my son. But she wasn't able to bring the baby back. Even though she was begging the baby to come back, the jiva didn't come back. But when Narada, because he was so potent, so powerful, and he said, jiva soul, come back. Immediately, the jiva soul came back. But he didn't come back to satisfy a wailing, miserable, lamenting person. He came back to give instruction, to help us go back to Godhead. So this is again a sign of our changing view, that we need to see that this material world is a temporary place, and we need to be ready to have our attachments cut. And sometimes when attachments get cut, it's a little bit ouch. But we have to be ready to have them cut, because that's why we're here. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Because we're here to get our attachments cut. And Srila Prabhupada and the assembled devotees, their mission is to cut them. And we don't let them cut them, then they'll give us something else. They'll give us a little, what do we call dumbing down. They'll minimize. You see, we go to preach. We can't tell people the absolute truth right off the bat. We have to dumb it down a little bit, so they'll get a little bit closer, a little bit more able to receive. And it's the same for us, even though we think we're ready to hear everything. We're not ready to hear everything. And because we're not ready to hear everything, we don't hear everything. Even though we read everything, even though everything is there, we don't hear it. At least we don't apply it to ourselves, because we're not really ready. We're not feeling comfortable with having all our attachments cut. And therefore, they're not cut. They still remain there, strands. So, but the sadhu is always trying to cut. There's one little story about a visitor who hears about this sadhu, and he goes on this trek, and he goes to this sadhu, and he goes in, and he's shocked by the fact that the person is sitting basically outside with nothing. And he has no anything, just a book. And he says to him, wow, you don't have anything. Where are your things? And the sadhu says to him, well, where are your things? You don't have anything either. He said, well, I'm just a visitor. I just came here He said, well, I'm just a visitor too. I just came here also for a little bit of time. So if we were ready to hear that, then we would, we wouldn't have a lot of things. But we have a lot of things. Why do we have a lot of things? Because we think, we need these things. And so we put these things together, and they weigh us down. They're like rocks. They're like rocks. And we try to cross the river with rocks. Rocks make us drown. So these attachments, they have to be cut, they have to be eliminated. And the sadhu helps us see things in proper perspective. And this analogy here, Prabhupada rather elaborately develops this idea that just as gold, or later on he talks about a pet, an animal, that is passed from one person to another. And as it becomes ours, we're attached to it. And then when we're not attached to it anymore, we bring it to the Goodwill, or we bring it to the Humane Society, and then someone else buys it, or someone else gets it. And then we're not attached to it anymore. It's no longer ours. It was ours before we were attached to it, but somehow we grew out of it. We're not attached to it anymore. We pass it on. Someone else gets it and becomes attached to it. But we're not attached to it anymore, because the possession, the possessiveness of it, the idea that it's mine, goes away, and then the thing in itself has no charisma. The charisma is actually in our perception of it, that we think this is my thing, and so I'm attached to it. But as soon as I get rid of that, and it's not my thing anymore, I put it in the Goodwill, now it could be anybody's thing. I don't go back and look at it every day and cry because, I gave my old chair to the Goodwill, and okay. But sometimes we become very attached to subtle things, subtle conceptions of life. And because we're attached to those subtle conceptions of life, we think that those things are ours. And we live in such a way that they're ours, and we become very attached to them. One story, I had an experience with the person who was preaching in the Buffalo Temple when I first joined was one devotee named Rupanuga Prabhu. And he was a very powerful preacher. He made so many devotees, great devotees, wonderful devotees. Burjan Prabhu and Prahladananda Swami, and I can go on and on. Trivikram Maharaj, so many devotees joined, 35 devotees joined in that year and a half by Rupanuga Prabhu's preaching and their collective existence in Krishna consciousness. And so Rupanuga Prabhu's wife, she was very inimical when he first joined the Hare Krishna movement. And she was burning his beads and tearing up his Bhagavad Gita, and she was really inimical. So gradually she came along, and she had a little son. Her son, his name was Eric, but he became a Kendra. And they went to see Srila Prabhupada in LA when she was becoming a devotee. She's still a devotee, nice devotee, but it was a hard road. So she went to see Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's first question to her was, is this your son? Are you his mother, or is this your father? She was like, what? He said, are you his mother, or is he your father? And so she didn't know what he was talking about. She said, what do you mean? He said, well, actually, he's your father, because he came to spiritual life before you did, and now he's helping you make spiritual advancement. So he's actually your father. You're not his, it's not that you're his mother, your guide. He's your father. So, because Prabhupada saw the position of fatherhood as leadership, and this boy was leading her in the absolute way, in the way to spiritual life. And so that role that she had, of course, she had an obligation materially as a mother, and even spiritually as a mother. But once we understand the spiritual nature of the living entity, then the obligations of our material roles also become clear. It's not that we're not supposed to do the things we're supposed to do materially as a mother, as a sister, as a father. What does it say? One should not become a mother, a father, a relative. Who's not a relative? Anyone here not a relative? How is it possible? You have to be a relative, somebody, right? So, in other words, everybody, don't become, period. Don't become, unless you can give your dependents spiritual knowledge and make them aware of the purpose of human life. So, when you understand that there's a soul, and not just the object to which you appear to be attached, because actually, when we consider it carefully, I was talking in this class yesterday, and I said, if someone like died here, and the body is laying here, and the soul is missing, then your attraction for the body becomes nothing. It's not like you think, maybe for a few seconds out of sentiment, you're like, oh, my mother, I just had this experience recently, 2 years ago, my mother passed away. And somehow or other, by Krishna's infinite mercy and arrangement, 1 month before my mother passed away, I had a stroke. So I was, I had a big thing. I had a surgery on my neck, and I had this big bandage. But my children, my daughters, they called me from LA and said, Mom, you got to come. Grandma's she's not doing very well. And I couldn't get any information or any communication. I was in Florida, she was in LA. So I got on a plane and I flew to Los Angeles. And my mother and my sister flew there too. And she's not a devotee in any way. So my daughters were there and, trying to, but, there's laws in this country. You can't get near somebody unless you can prove that you're their relative somehow or other. So anyway, I got, to be with her, and my sister, she thought, well, she's not that bad. I got to go to work, and she left. Krishna's mercy. So I was there alone with my mother for the last 2 weeks of her life. And at the end, I was reading to her. She was not conscious, which is the only way I could have read to her, by the way. The only way I could have read her scripture was that she would be unconscious. So she had Nrsingadeva, little deity at her head, and I was reading to her. And then she passed away. So they sent somebody, some pastor or some minister. He's supposed to be non-denominational. He was obviously not non-denominational. But anyway, he came and he said to me, he was praying, whatever, and then he said to me, do you want to be alone with your mother? And I looked at him and I said, my mother's not here. This is not my mother. My mother's gone. And he looked at me and said, oh yeah, for sure, right. He had no understanding of what I was talking about. So I explained to him a little bit, and but what's actually interesting is when my mother went into this hospice situation, they gave me this little book on how to deal with dying, and the steps of dying and what dying looks like, and this whole allegory of, the soul is like a boat, and the boat goes across the sea, and it's going to arrive on another shore, and, the intimation it's going to go to God somehow. They can't say which God because it's supposed to be non-denominational, so they just say it's going to go across the sea, and it's going to land on another shore. It's not going to be rudderless. And so they're talking about that the soul exists and the body dies, but when it comes down to it, and there's the body, and where's the soul, there's no what are you talking about? Your mother's not here. So even though the book he gave me actually had it pretty clear, he didn't have it clear at all. But by Prabhupada's mercy, by Krishna's mercy, you see the thing, what it is. And when it's there, when it's in front of you, there's this body. Because I haven't had much association with death. When my mother was getting older and older and losing some of her faculty, she was a very together person, very organized, very clean, very together. And she was going to the temple and mostly to the restaurant and having muffins. She really liked the muffins at the temple. So in LA. So she would go, sometimes, and she was very active, driving people around, and little by little she started to lose her faculties and her desire to live because she couldn't do things anymore. And I would call her up and I'd say, Mom, how's it going? And she'd say, well, I didn't have any funerals this week. So she was judging, she was seeing her friends one after the other leaving. And somehow or other, she was thinking, it's not going to happen to me. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right. But then at the end, she started to understand, no, it's not. I'm not going to be here forever. I'm on my way out. And but what did she hang on to? In those last moments, she was calling for my father, who passed away 45 years ago. And she was calling for him and calling out to the things, the attachments that she had in her life. That was the sad thing. So I was very grateful to Krishna that he let me be there. But the lesson was also for me that here's this body, and I have no attraction to this body. Take it away. My mother had signs all over the place what to do with her body. There were signs all over her apartment what to do with her body. And then she had an arrangement, had dial a number, they came, body went to New York to be next to my father, who is not there anymore in any shape or form, not at all, because 40 years, 50 years, it's gone, bones are gone, everything's gone. But the understanding is that because we're wrapped up in this attachment, we don't see things clearly. And when we do see things clearly, then we can really be a mother. We can really be a father. We can really be a friend. We can really be the president. We can really be the guru. We can really be the leader. Because that comes from our ability to really see the truth. And when we really have the truth, then we can reciprocate properly with the living entities. We know how to save them. We know what to give them. Just like Prabhupada said, I know what to give these people so that they can go back to Godhead in this life. I have the medicine. I know what to do. And I'm ready to go across the ocean to administer this medication that was given to me by my Guru Maharaj. So we also have the medicine, but sometimes we're afraid to take it, even what to speak of give it. We're afraid to take it. And we get afraid of detachment. Detachment's scary. Attachment feels better. It's warm and fuzzy and cuddly, and and it looks like it's more comfortable, and so we kind of embrace it. And we have to learn to see it properly before we can do what we have to do properly. So the key to proper attachment is proper detachment. As soon as we become properly detached due to knowledge, then we can manifest our caring for those people that have put in our care, that are close to us. We can do the right thing for them. It's not that it's unnatural. Prabhupada even says it's natural that a mother will be attached to her children, that you'll be more inclined to care for those who have been directly put under your care. And even more so, you'll be most inclined to take care of those who actually you feel are receptive to your care, right? Maybe you've had the great fortune of having to give advice to people who don't want your advice. Or they come and they say they want your advice, but they don't really want your advice. So you give them the advice and they do whatever they want anyway, and you think, why did I just waste 2 hours with that person? And then you're not very inclined to do it again. You're not very inclined to do that repeatedly, to give advice to people who don't take your advice. But we become more able to figure out how to give the advice and more able to know what advice to give, to have the perfection of that loving relationship when we actually have knowledge ourselves and we're actually detached. So detachment actually allows us to be genuinely affectionate instead of artificially affectionate. Because most people are attached to somebody, but they don't even know that person. They don't even know who you are. They're attached to you, but they don't know who you are. And when you leave, there you are. What they were attached to is still there. And it's like this gold. And it's like these pets that go from one place to another. It's not interesting anymore. It was interesting when you were there, but they don't know who the you is. They don't know who the soul is. And so because they don't know who the soul is, their attachment is artificial. And our attachment or realization or love, affection, can really be manifest in a very genuine way because we understand who you are and I know who you are. And not only do I know who you are, but I know who everybody is. So I can offer some kind of genuine reciprocation with every living entity according to their ability to receive it. Prabhupada was attached to everybody. He was attached to everybody going back to Godhead. And he really wanted to help everybody go back to Godhead. He had to, everybody know what triage is? So sometimes you have to do triage. You have to look and see who you can save and who's beyond saving. And that's why, in the nectar of instruction we get, don't talk to the faithless. Because triage says they're going to die. What can you do? You can't do anything. Don't waste your time with them. Find the people who are receptive, who you can help, and help them first. Because then they'll be able to help you help others, right? So your triage should go to the most innocent, receptive people and give them all you got. But at the same time, we have a desire to save everybody. And we can find ways. I remember when we were in New York, someone came to Srila Prabhupada, we were in Henry Street, and someone came to Prabhupada on the Vyasasana, the temple room was packed, and he brought a little plate and it had these white sweets on it, these white balls. And so Prabhupada took one and popped it in his mouth and said, "Simply wonderful." And so then he said, the devotee, I think it was Petit Udarana, I don't remember exactly, but he said, we're distributing on these on the train, Srila Prabhupada. And summarizing it, because Prabhupada said it in many different ways, he used a lot of different phrases, he said, they will become simply wonderful. Whoever eats these will become simply wonderful. So this is the way that we can give the medicine, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So a lot of sugar, a lot of butter, it goes down even better. Better with butter, huh? It helps the person go down, yeah. So we can help people that way. We can give them some simply wonderful, they can become simply wonderful. But Prabhupada gave us something for everyone, and we should find that administration which is going to save somebody from repeated birth and death. And we should understand for ourselves, looking at it from our own personal perspective, that we should let the doctor do surgery. And we should be grateful for the surgery. Surgery is not pleasant when you have it first. You have a big scar and you don't feel comfortable for days, you can't move. But afterwards, you can move better. Yes, sometimes. But this surgery, this spiritual surgery, it works if you're receptive to it. And if you're receptive to it, the spiritual master will cut the hard knot of material attachment and liberate you. He'll free you. There's a story of, are any of you familiar with the Gordian knot? Gordian knot? It's kind of a famous story of Alexander the Great, that there was this knot that was in front of a shop, and every day it would be added to. So it was this huge conglomerate mess of a knot. And there was a like a myth, a rumor that whoever could untie that knot would become the ruler of the world. And so everybody was traveling by, they'd see this knot and they'd spend out. You know what it's like when your sacred thread gets knotted, or, you can't help yourself. You're like there forever trying to get it unknotted. Just throw the thing away, it costs 4 pice, get another one. But no, you're standing there because it's like you can't get away from it. You have to. So people they would actually die there trying to untie this knot. They didn't drink, they didn't eat. They became obsessive compulsive, and they would try to untie the knot. But no one could untie the knot, and repeatedly again and again. So finally, Alexander the Great, it is rumored, came by with his sword, and he just took the sword and cut the knot in half, just destroyed it. And he became Alexander the Great. So we have these knots, and the spiritual master is ready to cut them, but we're like, no, I want to try to take them out gently and make sure the string is intact and everything is really good, and don't cut the knot, please. So if we are willing to allow the knot to be cut, then the spiritual master will come, just like Chichiketu and Angara and Narada did for Chichiketu. They just cut the knot. It was very heavy. But because he was ready to receive, then immediately there was benefit, and immediately he was freed. So I'll stop there. And if there's any question, maybe we could. So fast. Hare Krishna.
So, one is in Krishna lunch today. The sweet is simply wonderful.
Oh, very good. So everybody that eats will become simply wonderful.
Haribo. It's very interesting as you observe the Bhagavatam, and when you were speaking, as sort of going through a few instances that the spiritual master or Krishna, they're so expert as to know not just what the medicine is, what the dosage is, but how to administer it. For sometimes we're given medicine orally, and if you cannot take it orally, it's intravenously. However, but they know how to do it. In this case, Narada is giving the lesson, but it is being spoken by their child or the son. If Narada had said to Chitraketu, this is like this gold that goes from one place to another, has a different effect than when the child comes back from
So we have to learn
death.
how to do that.
Yeah, and says, I'm not your son. Or in the case of Arjuna, Krishna was a friend. And somehow as a friend he could speak till he realized, oh, you're not really my friend, you're the Supreme Lord. And in other cases, different people, like you gave the example of Rahugana and Jadabharata. So Jadabharata was a servant. And somehow Rahugana had to hear it from the mouth of a servant to humble him. If his wife had told him or something, not the same message. So I was appreciating from your class the expertise of, when we say the spiritual master is an expert.
Bilva Mangal Thakur heard it from a prostitute.
That's what. And the second is objectivity brings about detachment. And these verses, this one and I think the next one as well, they put things in a very objective perspective. Because long as things are subjective, it's hard to see things in its right place. But when it makes it so objective that this is like gold that goes from one's hand to another, another, it has a different effect.
And you see that in Bhagavad Gita too, that, the Sthita Pragya you were talking about yesterday. He sees stones and pebbles and gold is the same. And then a little later, he also sees friends and enemies is the same. Friends and enemies are a little harder because now it's like, my friends and enemies? I mean, the guy I wanted to kill the other day, I should see him. But stones and gold is a little bit easier to see. And, so very often Krishna, the expert devotees, remove it from the immediate issue. Even talking about other people is easier than talking about your friends or yourself.
That's helpful is when you ask persons, like in research, when they have to ask persons about things that are very private or personal. Questions are never asked, what do what is your practice? And they will never answer. So they always ask, do you know of anyone? Or have you heard? So then the sense of objectivity brings about the right answer. Others people will be, they want to say, they won't say the truth. They will fudge it.
I'd be interested in getting some of your marketing knowledge because I talk, not because I'm marketing, although we also do that, but I talk a lot about media awareness. I give seminars on media awareness to parents. Very, very valuable, actually, because otherwise their families become addicted to certain levels of media that they didn't even know existed, and the psychology behind it is very interesting. I'm sure you know a lot more than I. I only know it from studying, and you know it from doing it, or from being involved with people who do it. Right? When you said the moment of truth, I thought, yeah, that's very sad. Yes. Anybody else? No, he's just holding the microphone. He doesn't want me to accuse him of having a question. Yes.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you for the nice lecture. Cutting the knots of attachment. Family persons are there who have got responsibility towards their children. Suppose, can the spiritual master cut the knot of the attachment towards the children also, leaving the responsibility?
Well, again, it has to be done as you are able to see. And he doesn't cut the responsibility, cuts the attachment. There's two different things there. So the responsibility remains. You may have a responsibility, right? And you may have to execute that responsibility. What gets cut is the attachment. You have to do the responsibility, actually even and to do the responsibility effectively, you have to be detached. Even materialists, right? What happens when a child misbehaves in school and the teacher calls the parent in? It used to be that the parent would say, why are you misbehaving? Your teacher told me you're not behaving. You should be nice to your teacher. You should be responsible. Now they go in and they say, are you insinuating that my son, it must be because you're an incompetent teacher. Because there's many reasons for that. And one of the reasons for it is attachment. That I think anybody who came from my womb or anyone who came from the combination of me and my husband must be a Shaktivesh avatar. And so, how could you possibly think that they're a bad person? You must be an incompetent fool. That's attachment. And because of that attachment, I can't discipline, I can't direct my child appropriately. We see it all the time. People think that children are not supposed to do anything. They're just supposed to enjoy. So let me pile junk on them, all kinds of stupid things that they can do for hours with just their two thumbs. And they don't have to use their brain because after all, they're a child now, you don't want to push them. It's their time to have some fun. And then they grow up, and Prabhupada gives that example of the aunt who got her ear bit off because she never disciplined. And now discipline is almost not there. Now there's a slight swing back in the educational sphere. Discipline your children because they're going to be the adults of the future. They're going to be ruling the world. We better be careful. But due to attachment, we don't do what we have to do because we're going to see our child cry. We're going to see our child say, I hate you. We're going to see so many things. There's a little bit of a video. I wish I could get it because it's really good. Of this man who for the last 3 years, he asks parents to take in the middle of the night all the candy that their children have collected during Halloween, and eat it, or say they ate it. Did you see that? Okay, so he asked them, take away the candy, and then tell your kids I ate all your candy, and then he videos it. And you would not believe the way these children react. It's absolutely scary how these children react. I mean, they roll on the floor, they scream and yell, they pull their hair. You did what? They curse their parents. They say, I hate your guts, how dare you? I mean, they're like, because some candy. I mean, really. I went out all night, door to door, getting that candy, and you ate it. Why couldn't you eat it? Something else? Really, I mean, it's frightening. These are going to be the adults of the future. Look out. You think it's bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet. So even on the material sphere, attachment keeps us from disciplining our children. How can you raise a child to act like that? By not doing anything. That's how you do it. Because you're too attached. So you just think, let me give, let me give, let me give. Everything but discipline. So yes, the spiritual master will cut our attachment, and without that attachment, we can truly be responsible parents. Mixed with too much attachment, it clouds our vision. So we have to have that balance. Not that we give up the responsibility necessarily. The responsibility is there. And sometimes a higher responsibility may come. Prabhupada saw a higher responsibility. So he left a lower responsibility for a higher responsibility. And sometimes that happens. But most of the time, we have this responsibility, and that responsibility has to be done right. I had an experience just recently, actually, it's going on right now, where I was in Mayapur, and I was at the restaurant getting lunch one day, and I wasn't sitting with anybody, and some girl came over to me and said, do you mind if I sit with you? And I said, no, and we were talking, and she was a disciple of Radhanath Swami, and she was explaining to me how she didn't really think she ever wanted to get married, and blah, blah, blah. So I said to her, are you sure that's really what you want? You want to be alone for the rest of your life? You think you can handle that? You're strong enough? And she said, oh yeah, because I have my mother. And my mother will take care of me for the rest of my life. And I said, oh yeah, you think so? But your mother's not eternal. And she said, yeah, she's really strong and this and that. 2 days later, no exaggeration, honest, 2 days later, she got a call from her father, you have to come home immediately. And they sent her a ticket, and her mother had had a massive stroke, and she was brain dead. And to this day, she is still brain dead in the hospital on life support, because the family, except for the girl, is too attached to pull the plug. So 10 months later, this person is still on life support, completely unconscious of anything, no bodily overt sign of life, because this family can't be detached. And the girl is totally frustrated by it. So attachment makes us do stupid things. We can't do the right thing necessarily. Some attachment makes us inspired. We become attached to our spiritual master and we serve him. We're very enthusiastic. But attachment has a very strong downside. And as soon as it moves past a certain level, it blinds us. And so the spiritual master has the obligation to cut that attachment and to encourage us to take the real responsibility, to serve our family in a real way. And as we get older, then our obligations become less and less, like with Kailash, right? Kailash kept making up reasons why he had to stay around his family. But his spiritual master, after a while, said, come on, what are you thinking? They need they need a dog, they need a snake. And so then he made the arrangement with just a little whisper, and the family itself came out to beat him. Then he got it. Okay, I'll get it. But we don't want to be like that. We want to get out before, and just like Dhritarashtra. Look at what Vidura had to do to Dhritarashtra, to get Dhritarashtra to become detached. He was so attached to being in the palace, to being a big man on campus, to having people bow down to his lotus feet. He was so attached that he was living like a dog in the house of the people he tried to kill. And because of the mercy of his brother, Vidura, who came back to tell him, listen, look at you, you're disgusting. Don't you have any sense of right and wrong. Aren't you embarrassed? You're getting old and you're dying and you're living like a dog in the house of the very people you tried to kill. Get out of here and make some use of your life and get involved in spirituality. And finally, after how many years of getting instruction, he left and he went to perfect his life. So didn't even make it really to perfection, but at least he started. So this is the job of the spiritual master. And Vidura loved Dhritarashtra very much. He didn't have to come back. He was already gone. He came back because he loved him and because he was detached.
Mataji, sometimes parents got cut out of the attachment along with the responsibility too.
Yeah, but that's material. That's
So-
attachment to something else.
So, what is the responsibility? Their responsibility in such a way that working for the children is a waste of time. It doesn't work for the devotional practice. So, how to understand that situation?
I'm not sure I understood your question. The end of it. I didn't hear the last thing you said. Working something?
Working for the children
Working for the children is a waste of time.
is a waste of time,
So don't do
and
it.
they will be losing time in the devotional practice.
How old are the children?
Say 9, 10 years old.
9, 10 years old. Then why is working for the children a waste of time?
Suppose if their mental understanding is such that they will, it is not for the benefit of the.
Because because of their attachment, they think, oh, I shouldn't work for the children. It's a waste of time. I should do some spiritual stuff.
Yes.
Okay, I got it. But that's an attachment to something else. That's just misplaced attachment. If I want to give up my responsibility because it's too much of a pain in the neck, that's renunciation in the mode of passion. Right? So we can't give up our responsibility unless it's absolutely essential and our dependents are taken care of. This was a big problem when I first became a devotee. I have to tell you that a whole generation of people were affected by this mentality. And so I know it firsthand, what it feels like and how it manifests. And it's just another kind of attachment. It's an attachment to, to being powerful in a different way. Also an attachment maybe to having more results, because sometimes you see more results or the results are more obvious than when you put your effort into a child who's 9 or 10 or 8 or 5 or 4. You don't see the results for a long time. You see some results, but you never know what they're going to be until the child surrenders to Krishna on their own, which they can't really do until they're 16 because they don't have the real mental faculty to make the decision. No offense. But when I preach or when I go outside, the numbers come, people clap when I give a class, they throw money sometimes, and I feel the results more. I have a stick, people bow down when I walk in the room, and it feels good. It feels better than when I'm just working outside and bringing money in and paying the bills. And so I prefer that kind of attachment to profit, adoration, and distinction, and then this kind of attachment, and then I renounce my responsibility. And the whole society becomes chaotic. So that's a misunderstanding. That's a misunderstanding. So we have to really analyze what the cause of our desire to walk out is. And if Prabhupada said, if you don't have intelligence to figure it out, then ask somebody who does. Which means go to your spiritual master or your senior mentors and say to them, I want to do this, and see what they say. Because even Lord Chaitanya advised people, stay home, take care of your family, don't travel with me and leave everybody. That's not permissible. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Let me go on. How am I?
By the way, the same letter is on the same day, 21st of November as today. Prabhupada sent.
Really?
Yeah, I just checked.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.